am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. In this episode of the Breaking Beliefs podcast, I interview Laura Mangan, who is the 2019 to 2020 National President of the Accounting and Financial Women's Alliance. Laura has served as a volunteer on the AFWA National Board since 2012 and on the AFWA Mesa East Valley Chapter Board since 2005. After earning her bachelor's degree in accountancy from Northern Arizona University and her MBA from Arizona State University, her career has focused on management accounting roles in small and medium-sized manufacturing companies. She is currently the controller for SV Pro in Tempe, Arizona, and is a CPA and certified management accountant. During our discussion, Laura shares how she has navigated her career as an introvert and how she has not let that get in the way of her success when taking on leadership roles. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, and I'm with Laura Mangan, and she is the National President of the AFWA. And Laura, do you want to give us a little background on yourself?
I am a management accountant by training. I earned my bachelor's degree at NAU and my MBA from ASU. And I've spent over 20 years in different management accounting roles, mostly in manufacturing and mostly for small and medium-sized companies. And then I've been active with accounting associations, mostly with the Accounting and Financial Women's Alliance. I joined them in 2002, and then just was asked to, serve on my chapter board, and that kind of led to one role to the next role. Met with a lot of great members from across the country. All of them just encouraged me to continue, beyond my chapter, and that's how I got involved as a regional director and as a national director. And being able to serve on the national board is just my way of giving back to our members.
So what was it about being part of an accounting women's association versus other associations you were in that got you really interested?
One of the things is just being able to have that additional support to help me grow into that leadership role. There weren't a lot of women in the higher level accounting positions, so I didn't see as many role models. So
Yeah. So maybe you can give us a little background, like how did you even choose the field you're in when you were little? You wanted to be an accountant, or did you want to be something else?
Not specifically. I didn't know. I knew I kind of liked business. Went into just the College of Business. Wasn't sure exactly. I knew I didn't want to do tax or audit.
Yeah.
Started out as a finance major. My very first finance class, I was in a room full of future stockbrokers, realized that was not my niche either. I was actually very lucky that NAU had two options under their accounting major. One was the public track, which most people are familiar with. Management track. Actually, go in and become part of that company and help them grow and succeed. And that's where I wanted to be.
Okay. So what was it about that versus public accounting?
Part of it was, I am an introvert. I do get very nervous going into different unfamiliar situations, and so the idea of having to go to different client accounts and visiting them like every couple of weeks, I'm like, that was just not appealing at all.
Right.
But I do like accounting is where you can have that, you tell the story of the company, and so you take that financial data, you work with the leadership team to try and see, okay, this is what the story is telling us. If we don't like the story, these are the steps we need to do to change that.
Okay. So where were you from? Where did you grow up?
Mostly grew up in Mesa, Arizona.
Okay.
My dad was in the Air Force when I was born, so we traveled a little bit. By the time I started school, we were mostly out in East Mesa, so I am an Arizona native.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your mom, was she working? Or?
She was going back to school a little bit. So most of the time growing up, she was taking community colleges, one class at a time. She actually graduated from her bachelor's degree from ASU about a semester after I graduated.
Oh, how cool. Yeah.
So I always had that encouragement to get my education.
Yeah. So it was really from her that she was like, she wanted you to go to college and get a degree.
And then my dad actually was going back to try and get his MBA about the time I was born. Couldn't quite get through the accounting class. Engineering background, great with math, but just couldn't get past the accounting class. So when I went to school, his advice was anything but accounting.
Oh, that's funny. So you went there. Yeah. Like any good daughter.
Surprise.
Yeah. So what is it about accounting? So you said you were an introvert.
Mm-hmm. Still am.
So how does that affect decisions that you've made?
I think maybe it being less adventurous and risk-taking, not speaking up for, different roles and things that you might be able to do. Some people, without having, a lot of experience might be, more adventurous and willing to kind of step into this role or that role and to take on different projects. I'm a little less, likely to do that. So I'd like to really be, careful and cautious and aware of what it is I'm doing, make sure that I've got all the data behind, any of the decisions that I'm looking to make. So I think that's part of what kind of shaped my career.
Yeah. So I can see that it created your path of, you said, because being uncomfortable going into different situations you weren't sure of, and each one going into corporate. But once you were in, you must see that even though you know the work, your situations change all the time, right?
And that's the nice part about being in a smaller company versus a larger company. When I was in my MBA program, a lot of my classmates were in the bigger companies like Intel's and Honeywell's in the finance areas. So their roles were very narrow. They might change them year to year
right.
and get that kind of exposure. But when you're in a smaller company, you wear all of the hats all of the time. So your day is always going to look a little bit different. One task you're working on, you come up with a roadblock, you switch over to something else. So that's one of the things that I've enjoyed in that kind of environment.
So how did you push yourself to be comfortable with that? Because that doesn't come naturally to you, right?
No, just really being able to sit in a leadership or management team meeting and speak up. These are the things that I need. This is what I'm doing for your department. This is what I'm requesting. These are the deadlines by the auditors. This is not optional. I need your support to do that. So that I think has been the challenge of making sure that I'm speaking up for those things.
So how do you learn that? Like, how do you
practice.
Think you got
practice, and then the consequences of not getting that information from the auditors. They're after you constantly. So I've got a little bit more reason behind my requests than just I would really like this, but I need this by this date.
So have you gotten in trouble ever? Just not big trouble, but where you found yourself in an issue because you couldn't speak up, or you found yourself that you didn't speak up when you should have?
I think there's probably been a few opportunities that have been missed. It's like, okay, that could have been handled differently. That could have been handled a little bit quicker, and then things can fester and stuff like that. So the sooner and the more proactive you can be in that, I think the easier it is to whatever the issue might be to get through, resolve it, and move forward.
Were your parents introverted?
No, I'm like the only member of my family who's not entrepreneurial spirited, and so I'm not sure where all that came from.
But you've got that to look to, when you need. So with all that, has there been examples to help you break from that when you need to?
Just watching my parents as they were trying to do grow their businesses and things like that, kind of seeing what it took to step out into that face-to-face meetings with clients or potential clients. So I think seeing that helps have that conversation when I need to. Right.
So tell me how an extroverted person bothers you.
I don't think most of the time they realize that as an introvert, I can have conversations, I can talk. We're at a 3-day conference. I'm going to be exhausted by the end of it. They seem to be energized by that energy and that feeling. No, that's just really draining. So I do need to take a little step back, and sometimes they might not realize that's why you're sitting in the corner, just flipping through your phone or something, so that you can have that quiet time to recharge.
Yeah, and I think that's really an important thing, is that a lot of time people look at body language or what someone's doing and take it personally. And trying to understand when you're working with anyone or have interpersonal relationships, that you do get that understanding of what makes each person comfortable. Because if you don't, then you look at you in the corner and you're like, oh, well, she just doesn't want to be a part of it.
It's like sometimes we just are recharging and then we can regroup. So.
Yeah. So how then, is that how you can get yourself re-energized with people that are extroverted, or are there other tactics that you do that help you?
I think some of it is, taking a little bit of time back and just being prepared. If I know I'm going to be, speaking with someone who maybe is a little bit more outgoing than myself, I know I need to maybe think about, okay, if I'm going to schedule a meeting, can I do that maybe in the morning or the afternoon? When am I going to be at my freshest so that I can handle that conversation a little bit better?
Right. That's a really thoughtful thing of making sure that you can show up with the right energy.
Some people are morning people, and so they're,
yes.
I am not. So I know that first thing morning is not the time for me to be having, difficult conversations. That's the time I can go through my emails, check things off the list, focus on what I need to do that day, and then I can do that a little bit later.
Yeah, and I really like that, because I think a lot of times, so if you have a meeting in the morning and it doesn't go well, you blame the meeting rather than taking responsibility of how can I make sure I show up at my best.
Was I prepared for that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll talk about your role in a second, but just your role here with the AFWA, with the personality that you have, what gave you the confidence to do this? And was there anyone that kind of brought you along, that coached you along the way?
Actually, my boss was surprised that I could actually do this role, having gotten familiar with how I am at work. It's like, I don't know how you serve in the national board and do these kinds of things.
What's different?
Just because I am quiet in the office, and like, how can you lead an association when you don't speak up as much?
Isn't that interesting? Like, you can't be a silent leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say, some of the things that have been really helpful in my path through AFWA, when I was looking for some kind of, networking event to, again, help me kind of pull me out of my shell a little bit. When I found AFWA, it was just a small enough chapter where I felt comfortable, kind of getting to know the individual members. They're just very encouraging. Right after I was finishing my MBA, that's when our incoming chapter president, Polizani, had reached out to me and said, I've got a couple of spots open on my board. Would you be interested? I'm like, well, I'm going to have some free time. Perfect chance to jump in. So I'm like, sure, I can take minutes. So I signed up to be secretary.
Did you pause before that of wondering if you should or not, or you were ready?
It wasn't until after I realized that our secretary role, we took the minutes in the meeting, and then next month we had to read them out loud.
Oh.
So that was before we got into the habit of emailing those documents to everyone. So that, again, was another push to get me outside of my comfort zone and outside of that box.
Yeah. So then where did it go from there?
From one position to another, went through, served as our chapter president as well. Took on a lot of responsibility with our programming.
And you have to speak every meeting, right?
You do, and you have to actually, reach out to people you don't know to get them to be speakers.
Right.
So that, again, was like, how do I approach, this person does not know me, they don't know why they should talk to me, but how do I make that a compelling, conversation?
And what did you do?
Got really good at emails and LinkedIn, and this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, this is why I'm reaching out to you. I was looking for this type of speaker. You seem to be an expertise in the area. Would you be interested, or perhaps have a recommendation? So that's usually a pretty soft sell and easy enough to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. So I think that is an important point that I just want to rehash a bit, because sometimes this is even brought up in generational differences, not just personality, right? That older generations will be like, oh, they don't want to go out to networking events. They don't want to go to do the things that I did, and they just want to be on social media. But again, it's not necessarily generational. It's a personality thing. Yes. And if someone's better at social media with networking, how do you enhance that person's ability to be able to contribute versus just because that was the way you knew how to do it?
And in associations, we see we saw a big decrease in membership and activities, and even our own members, attending events and things, because as online education opportunities popped up, it became less critical for them to go to those face-to-face events. So then, people shy away from that, but they kind of forget that importance of that, learning how to interact with people, learning how to go to a conference and manage that kind of schedule, and just being able to have those face-to-face conversations. So I think we're going to see a little bit more shift back towards that as people realize, okay, how can I can't do everything remotely. I do need to learn how to speak to people. I do need to know how to, communicate and type up, requests and appropriate business communication. So that's kind of hard to do when all you do is text or instant message. So you don't learn those skills.
Right.
But I think one thing that our AFWA members in our chapter have the opportunity to do is to take that young professional who might be good at the social media, let them loose on something like LinkedIn with a purpose, so that they can start reaching and building out to other people, building their networks in that professional capacity. And then they can see how that can really impact their career.
I love that. Yeah. So were there people that helped guide you with that, or that really helped give you the confidence to keep taking on the next leadership level and give you those tips of being successful?
Most everyone I met in my chapter were so supportive that, they encouraged me to continue in my chapter roles. I actually followed Paula onto, a regional director role, and then onto the national board. At the time, we had a member from our Phoenix chapter serving as the national president. We had a member from our Flagstaff chapter serving on the exec committee. Paula was stepping on. So I just had such great role models locally to follow into national board service.
Well, and I think that goes to building relationships too, that a lot of times people's success or ways that become leaders is because other people believe in you and the relationships you develop and how you pull people along, right?
Especially if you start feeling a little shaky about your own, skill sets or your own beliefs, it's like someone else is believing in you and they're encouraging you, and so that kind of helps you continue moving forward.
Down times, yes. So you said that your boss at work sees a different side of you. So why is that?
Because I am quiet at work. It's a smaller company, and so I've got a small team, and then I'll be in so many different meetings with different management teams. So he doesn't see all of the stuff that happens behind the desk and things like that. So just thinking, how can this very quiet person who doesn't speak up a lot at work, how does she manage to run a big organization?
Right. So what do you tell them?
It helps that they're accountants.
Yeah.
So we share the same kind of background and experience. So I think that's easier to do, especially when it's a group that you're comfortable with. It's a lot easier to speak up at like a small chapter meeting versus trying to do a bigger organization. So that kind of helps build your confidence and lets you keep moving forward. Yeah.
So are there beliefs that you've had through this journey of kind of expanding yourself as well too, that you think rub off on other people, or that you try to make sure people come away with from working with you?
Hopefully that they don't limit themselves. If this is not my area of expertise, if this is something I'm comfortable with, can you do baby steps to get comfortable with it? Can you learn to grow and or find different ways to give back or participate or to kind of make your own impact?
I think when each of us go through our career, there's moments we take stock in the things that we do, and me being an extroverted person, if I'm in a meeting, I'm probably speaking more than you. So how do you handle that and make sure that you're getting what you need across, or someone like me doesn't dominate that conversation?
Most of the time when introverts aren't speaking, it's because we're thinking. So one thing I will try to do is if a good thought comes into my head, I'll make a note, because by the time someone else has finished their conversation, I may have forgotten what I was going to say. So at least having a note down on the paper during that meeting will remind me, okay, this is what I wanted to bring up. And then when there's a break in the conversation, then I can speak up a little bit more.
Do people that work with you realize that about you now?
I think so. And it helps too that some of our meetings, we actually have, agendas, and everybody takes turns going around the room. So then you don't have to worry about, I'm not going to have an opportunity to speak up. I have, the numbers I need to share in front of me. And then when it's my turn, I'll do that.
Yeah, really good point there. I think to have a structured meeting for different personalities in the room is important, so everyone has a chance to say what they need to.
Especially when you have sales and accounting in the same meeting. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Doesn't mean sales gets their way, though.
No.
Right?
You still have to prove budget.
Exactly. So are there other things besides, you've done an amazing job of working with being introverted and succeeding so much as a leader? Are there other belief systems that you've had throughout your life that have been something that have helped you or something that you have had to overcome in the roles you've been in?
Probably just a big part of it is to not be afraid to try something new. Trying to step outside of my comfort zone, getting involved with associations, hosting different events. We've been doing our chapter seminar for 13, 14 years now. So that takes a lot of coordination and just thinking that you can actually accomplish that, because when you have a smaller chapter, there's not as many people to share the responsibilities and things like that. So there's something that anybody can contribute. And then trying to help other members step into a new role, kind of walking them through, showing them what has worked, what we've tried in the past, so that they don't go into it not understanding what maybe the time requirements are, what the resources are, and being able to just kind of show them these are the things that have worked for us in the past, and then let them kind of put their own spin on it.
Yeah. So trying something new and giving people space to create, I guess, is the...
And then being for them what other people have been for me is that that source of encouragement and that belief that you can accomplish this.
And so it sounds like throughout you've had people around you that have believed in you.
Yes. It's been very helpful.
Yeah. And I think, there's never an understatement in that of giving people that opportunity to grow. And oftentimes everyone, is just focused on their own lives. They've got demands, but what time are you putting in your workday or your personal life to dedicate to somebody else, whether it's in your day, your week, or whatever, so that you're helping to expand other people as well?
Maybe a little time every day, whether it's following up on a request, or somebody's got they're trying to make a job change. It's like, hey, do you know somebody? I said, well, I usually find out different opportunities, so let me see if something looks like would be a good fit for you. I'll make sure to make that introduction, little things like that.
Yeah. And I think it all comes down to people need to know they exist, right? That they're not being ignored, even if they've got, personalities that aren't extroverted, or that they're not the leader in the room, that every person matters, right?
And taking that time to, sit down and talk with them and ask their opinion, especially if they're somebody who doesn't offer it very often, asking them, what do you think about this? Or do you have any ideas to kind of help whatever the project might be?
Yeah. So what kind of advice would you give other introverted people, especially young professionals coming out? Like, what would be some ideas for them to push past?
We actually had a conversation this morning in the first time attendee conferences. There's a lot of new attendees at the conference. Trying to help them make the most of it is like, if you are an introvert, pace yourself, because this is a long 3 days. You don't want to wear yourself out. Take it, if you need a break, take a little break for yourself, kind of recharge, then go back. Another idea was just to really focus on a one-on-one conversation, get to know one person. It's not as overwhelming as if you've got a whole group of people that are all talking at one time. You just have a nice quiet corner, you have a great conversation, you walk away with somebody, a new relationship.
Right. If you meet one person, you accomplish something.
You did.
Right. You don't have to be somebody you're not,
It's so much
find
easier
that
to
comfort
be
level.
yourself. As I was walking from the session, I saw a whole lot of, small two people conversations going on. Like, there's this whole big conference over there, but there's these nice little relationships that are being built, and that was good to see.
And that's what lasts, right?
Yes.
All right. So I like to do some rapid fire questions at the end, and you pick a category.
Health.
Yep. Okay. So things or actions that I don't have that I want as far as my health?
I don't have no stress.
No.
Just prepping for conference and everything. It's been a really hectic schedule, so I'm looking forward to having a little less stress.
Yeah, and play at Disney.
Yes.
Things or actions I do have that I want.
I've got some good resources for healthier living. I've in my non-accounting volunteer roles, I've worked with the Go Red for Women Ambassador Board in the Phoenix area, and so always some good resources on how to just take those small steps to be healthier, a little bit more active, and eating right. And so it's nice to have those resources to fall back on.
Yeah. Things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
That was like a lot of negative, so I was having a hard time answering that one. Nothing really popped into my head when I was thinking about
that you don't have anything that you don't want with your health, which is good.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Things or actions that I do have that I want.
It's just a good resource for my downtime, for my quiet time. My cat, Mr. Snuggles. So you get so hectic and things like that. There's 1,500 things to do. We're talking about not multitasking. Well, when he wants attention, I don't get to multitask. It's just him. So It's a nice way to force myself to sit back, relax, and let everything else wait.
Yeah. Remember to be present.
Stay focused.
Yeah, exactly. So is there anything you want people to take away from this conversation or to know about the association?
Find whatever association kind of fits either your industry, your career path, kind of your niche, and get involved. One of the things I'll usually tell people is the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And it is certainly true.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today and sharing your story. And I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for our mindful moments in this episode of the Breaking Beliefs podcast with Laura Mangan. Now, there were a few items that I want to pause on that Laura discussed about being an introvert and making sure that we are more mindful and aware of how we affect other people's personalities, and maybe even how accepting we are of things that we see that we may interpret taking something personally versus understanding that that's just what that person needs and it has nothing to do with you. And that's just our natural inclination. So when Laura talked about that, oftentimes when things are too busy or hectic, or there's a lot of extroverted people around and they get excited, that she actually needs to take moments to step back from the group, to go in the corner, to re-energize herself to keep going in that kind of day. And I think a lot of times we will misinterpret those things if we see someone on the phone or not paying attention or going off on their own, that means that they don't like us or they're upset about something. And really, it's just about them. It's just that they need their own time to re-energize. So it's important for us to really get in that seat of being compassionate toward another person rather than assuming or judging what they are going through. And I think it's also important where she talked about some of the tools that she did as an introvert to make herself more comfortable and help her get to leadership positions. And one of them was modeling after her parents, that she saw her family of entrepreneurs and how they would take risks. And then she had to internalize that for herself of what could be comfortable for her. And I think that's really important, that we don't just try to duplicate what we see someone else doing and assume that that will work for us. It's more learning, right? And that's another mindfulness lesson, is stepping back and observing, not judging, and not being critical of how somebody is, but really just observing how they go about the same activities that you may go about, and taking little pieces from that and understanding how could that really help me to improve my own self, and what things would be authentic to me, not changing who I am. So knowing that she's more cautious and less willing to take risks. She's actually modeled it in ways to push herself past her comfort zone, where she talked about the ways that she moved up through AFWA and having to speak in front of groups, and even starting with speaking the minutes in front of groups, getting herself comfortable little by little. And I think she said that is, taking those baby steps, not trying to jump to the end of national president, but actually taking one step at a time and just being okay with where you are, rather than trying to reach for something that you may not be ready for. And because she's taken a very steady path, what she's done is set herself up for success to make sure she's comfortable in whatever role she's in before she maybe takes the next step. And maybe she wants that step or not. I think it was really important to the conversation we had about how extroverts can impact an introvert, and where they need to actually monitor their energy so that they are heard, and that the extroverts are giving them a chance to speak as well. And I know I can be guilty of this, because as an extrovert, I am ready to talk. I'm ready to give my ideas. But it's really taking those moments to pause and give those people in the room the opportunity to speak up. So some of the tips that she said was making sure that she had notes of what she wanted to make sure she said before the end of the meeting. I mean, I don't know that any of us are good at making sure that before we walk in a meeting, we accomplish 1 to 3 things that we wanted to say or accomplish before the end of the meeting. So not only having an agenda, but knowing from an individual standpoint, we must accomplish this, makes you feel more accomplished at the end of that meeting. And I also loved her idea of making sure that you go around the room to make sure each person takes a turn of speaking. Sometimes in our fast-paced society, it's hard to remember to do that. So what I learned from this conversation, and I hope that you take away as well, is not to underestimate what an introvert can do. That doesn't mean that they're not a leader. It's that you're giving them those little opportunities to get comfortable along the way, and making sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all culture, that we are cognizant of the different personalities, the different generations in the room, and making sure that we are creating that awareness and space so each person can be at their best. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.